Okay, thank you for joining. This is, and I appreciate you all being on time. I know there's a few more that will probably join in a minute, but thank you for being here on time. And today is our what we call our Living in Stride webinar. So for those of you who are new or aren't yet used to this rhythm, we have a theme for every month that rotates on a quarterly basis. So we do self, then leader, then team, or leadership and then team. So this month it's about leadership. Next month will be about team. And so the leadership topic for this month is resilience. And in this webinar, what we talk about is some themes about resilience that are linked to you and, being true to yourself. And when we have our next meeting in 2 weeks' time, which is our ID Masterclass, that's for those of you who have a real interest in digging deeper into the topic and understanding like the nuances from an ID point of view to really learn how to apply this for your own ID. And that's more of a discussion where you'll have the opportunity to talk about maybe some of your own challenges around resilience, or where you've succeeded in being more resilient and your stories may well help others as well. So with all of that, I'm going to walk you through some slides now just to provoke some thinking and some discussion. And in this back end of today, we'll have more discussion. So this topic of resilience is really interesting because we're at a time right now where whether you look locally or globally, there is just so much going on in terms of, well, various levels of turbulence, but, quite extreme, obviously, when we think about things like what's happening in the Ukraine. But for those of you watching what's going on in Australia, if you're from overseas, the east coast of Australia has just been absolutely flooded with record floods, like 2 meters higher than our previous records. It's been an absolute disaster over here for the last couple of weeks. So when you think about, just have some slides to show you, if you look back on the history, and this has happened both in America and Canada, as well as in Australia, but the last couple of summer seasons have just been incredible fires. We had like over 12 million acres of land burned 2 summers ago. And it was just like never ending, and when you drive through that space, it's just catastrophic. We've then had a couple of rounds of COVID. We had that first pass of COVID, and we thought we're making progress. And then it's like, no, actually, we're going to be locked down. And I remember when it first happened and our Prime Minister said, this could be like a 6-month exercise. And I remember at the time thinking, well, he's just saying that to, like set expectations. It probably won't take 6 months. And 2 years later, here we are. So you talk about resilience. I mean, it's been a long effort and several goes at this, where we think we're out of lockdown or out of a tricky situation, then we're back in it. And obviously it's been horrific in some cases when it's hit families personally. Then we've had the floods just recently. I mean, it's just devastating. And I'm just talking about Australia. I know floods have happened in other parts of the world as well, and other natural disasters. And then you've got what's happening now in the Ukraine. And that is, I mean, as late as this morning on the news, you've got just a hospital with women and children that's being bombed, and it's just devastating. So when you talk about resilience, there's all of these things happening geographically, geopolitically, and then even in Australia just recently, we lost one of our iconic people last weekend, Shane Warne, one of could well go down in history as our most famous cricketer ever, and certainly one of our greatest sports people. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens for his memorial service. But I would expect the MCG to be sold out at 100,000 people. The sense of loss that so many people are experiencing, it's just like one after the other, after the other, after the other. And so I know there are people in the conversations I have, people are now sort of saying, what's next? What is going to happen next that we need to be ready for? And no one can predict it, but there's just been such a string of tragedy, disaster, loss, and obviously personal loss that none of us might even be aware of. And more than ever before, not to mention like working from home, where people are dealing with the challenges of schooling children at home and working from home together and the impacts on family. that have caused all sorts of tensions. Family lawyers will tell you they've never had as much business as what they've had now, you know? So people are in a place of like resilience is real. They've got to dig deeper than they've ever gone before. And so we're talking about the topic of leadership. And I thought as I reflected on this and you look back and you sort of think about who has really stood out as a leader through these crises, and are there traits about those people that stand out? So not all of you know this person, but those of you in Australia and certainly New South Wales would recognise this person as our Chief Fire Commissioner at the time. And the way that he led, I mean, I remember people saying, boy, if he ever tried to run for Prime Minister or some more senior office, he'd be a shoo-in, because the leadership that he demonstrated at that time was just incredible. And then we had Gladys Berejiklian, who was the New South Wales Premier, and Jacinda Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, one of the smallest countries in the world. Her leadership just stood out around the world. And in fact, now, if you Google who are the most successful or prominent leaders in the world, she is in that list, like of the top 5 people. Like she really stood out. For those of us locally, I think every day at 11 o'clock, we dial in to listen to what our leader, in this case, Gladys Berejiklian, had to say about COVID and how we get through COVID. And then more recently, we've got this hero that everyone around the world, whoever had heard of Vladimir Zelensky before the last month. In fact, the Ukraine
The Russians got it.
Did we lose him? Oh, is he frozen? Oh, he's gone. He'll be back.
You know, you might not be far off with the Russians got him. They might have a virus thing that picks up the name and shuts it all down.
He'll be back.
Yeah,
Ian's
because
like,
he's got resilience.
He's there.
My
There he
apologies.
is.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Paul. Yeah.
Ian, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you.
Let me call up that slide. I don't know what happened. Zoom.
I think with the rain, everything has gone crazy with the internet here. I'm blaming it anyway.
Zoom is
It's our
not
NBN.
Yeah, so I was just saying these leaders to me are the ones that have really stood out, not just to me, but to many people in the last few weeks. And I find it interesting when there's 195 countries in the world, all of whom have gone through COVID. And, you know, only a few leaders stood out. And by the way, that's just country leaders. There's also governors and premiers and people within state, within local government areas, within businesses. I know there are lots of other leaders that.
Is he frozen again?
There's other leaders that have done other amazing things, but these just really stand out.
Yeah.
As what? To me, they stand out as all of them as big failures because they're getting themselves into this mess. But
Out in all of those different areas.
You keep dropping out, Paul. It's going to leave us hanging.
You got this, Ian. I believe in you.
Don't interrupt him.
Don't
I
do
think-
that to avoid improvise, Jose.
Don't interrupt or avoid it. Advise up complete.
Use complete avoid improvise. Yeah, just throw him in the deep end right at the last minute.
And then ask him, is there anything we can do to help?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Paul.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what's happened is I tried to dial into the meeting, 4 or 5 times, and I think those ones that didn't work are now deciding to come online. That would be my guess. But so I apologize for this happening. I don't know what's different this time. But
It's part
Anyway.
of resilience, Paul.
that's it. That's it. So when you look at these people and what stood out about them, I'd like to sort of unpack what maybe some of these qualities are. I just find it really interesting that so few of them have really stood out. And so in terms of qualities across the board, like I look at it and I think, well, there's some qualities that stand out. Certainly resilience is one of them. But what are they actually doing that really stands out to us? Like, what are some of the behaviors? So the first thing that stood out to me was these people get in it with you. Like you look at Vladimir Zelensky, he's wearing, the camouflage outfits. He's got the jacket on. He's, in there with the troops. Like he's not in some ivory tower managing all this from afar. He is in the trenches with the people and you feel it. It's not just what he's doing, but you feel it. When Gladys Berejiklian was addressing us every day, she was in it with us. She had her own parents in isolation. She couldn't see them. She had the same challenges going on as the rest of us. And yet somehow for all of that same strain and turmoil, she didn't get
Lost you again, Paul.
Probably the quickest thing is close off and sign back in real quick rather than try to fix anything.
Yeah, I think that's what he's doing. Here we go. Try again. Oh, you're on mute, Paul.
I'm so sorry. I hope that'll be the last time. Anyway, let me share my screen. Okay, so the second thing that I saw was they have strategies, like clearly they have something they're working on, but really what's standing out about their leadership is not how clever the strategy is. It's actually their personal example. Like most of us probably don't even remember what Gladys's strategy was or what Shane Fitzsimmons' strategy was through the bushfires or what Vladimir's strategy might be right now in the Ukraine. But you just look at their personal example. It's the leadership is coming from their personal example. And I think that's great for each of us because we don't need to be in a situation where we have to be really wise with strategy. If we want to show leadership in a time where resilience is really needed, it really says something about our personal example. How are we leading personally? And then there's the point about you never hear them once complain or get consumed by the negativity or the strain of the moment. They acknowledge it. They get that it's tough. You can see it on their faces that it's exhausting for them too. But somehow part of this rising above is that they stay very future focused and they talk about what they can do and what they will do and what the hope of the future will provide. They don't stay in the past. And that's not a gift, that's a choice. And then finally, I find this one really interesting, is there's still, no matter what their ID might be, no matter who they are or what the circumstances are, there's still a leap of faith that they have to take. And I have found this personally to be something really true about those that are most successful at a leadership level. There's no amount of security or confidence that you can actually embody that removes the fear of being bold. There's always that thing of like, oh my God, I just have to take a leap of faith here. You can have the best track record under the sun, and all that does is inspire you to take on bigger challenges, because invariably there's still a leap of faith that's required. So this is what they do. And you can apply this to every one of those leaders I put up before. And I'm sure the other leaders that I didn't have up that stood out through a time of crises and have shown resilience, I would, suggest to you they'd be showing these types of behaviors in what they do. But then you go deeper. So this is, for those of you who have studied ID, we talk about level 4 questioning. So there's what you see, and then you dig deeper to go, okay, that's what we see, but why? Where does that come from? The question to me is, how do they do that? I mean, if this is something we all want to be better at, being more resilient, and we want to learn from those who are doing it, what is it that makes them do what they do? Like, how do they do it? What do they call on? What are the conversations they have inside themselves? Is it to do with how they're wired? Like, what makes them do the things that they do? That's where we want to get to now in sort of understanding resilience. And the first thing I'd say to you is perspective. Perspective is powerful. There is definitely a leadership quality for resilience around perspective. And these are just some of the things that relate to perspective, this ability to rise above. No matter what your ID might be, that seems to be something that the best leaders do. They get above the situation so that they're not consumed by it, and they're able to have a perspective that is future oriented, but also not consumed by the negativity and get mired in that. There's a perspective about service to others. They just don't lose sight of the fact that they're really here for others, no matter what. Look at what Vladimir's doing right now. And I imagine that there are continuous conversations with themselves where they have to work at staying focused on these things. It's not natural to do that. It's a conscious decision that they make to choose to have that perspective. All of us can do it, but it's like we hear people say it's a mental muscle, and it's something we need to, keep working at. What I would say to you is, when you start using a muscle, you might start and then fall backwards, and then do a bit more and fall backwards. You don't just do these things perfectly from the get-go, and I'm sure they would be the first to admit that. But if you at least focus on maintaining a really healthy perspective, especially with the conversations you have with yourself, to stay positive, stay in service of others, stay future focused, and stay above it, that gives you a lot of capability from a resilience point of view. There are 4 things. Perspective is the first. The second, deep-seated beliefs. When you've got to dig deeper, where do you dig deeper? What does that mean? Like dig deeper. Does that mean you work harder? Maybe, but this isn't about physical work. This is about digging deeper mentally. And so some people, this is where they're grounded in spirituality or their religion or some form of faith. For some people that are not as religious oriented or faith-based, it will be in certain life lessons. I know there's a lot of people, for example, that have, studied things like martial arts, and there's a number of life principles that are actually very connected to some of the teachings that relate to, spirituality that they rely on. And this can be too, where a leap of faith comes, where they go, well, that's why it's called faith. I don't know for sure, but I'm trusting, and I'm taking that leap of faith. Sometimes you just have a track record. In my case, I've been in business 30 years. I've been through a lot of challenges, and we're still here. So it does give you a confidence. You might have had the same thing with your children, where you've had tough times with kids, but you know what? It all works out in the end. And there's a lot of us at the other end of raising our children that can sort of say, okay, if I'd have known that it was all going to be okay like this, I wouldn't have sweated some of those things back 20 and 30 years ago. If someone could have said to me, it'll all work out, just like it's all worked out, we could have had a more relaxing journey, you know? So track record does give us more to draw on in terms of digging deeper, for sure. But that is something that people use to be more resilient. The third thing that I'd suggest to you is that they bring their best game. You know, they're very conscious of the role they play leading and influencing, and that they need to be on their game. And that, again, is not something they wake up with a gift, you know, given to them. It's a choice they make about how they choose to live each and every day. There's a self-awareness about what they need to be at their best. And they know that if they're in stride, and not that they've necessarily done their ID, but they need to go about doing things their way. They know that, at least they know that. Now, what we know, given our knowledge of ID, is you just can't be leading effectively or operating effectively if you are stressed, if you're lacking confidence and self-esteem. That puts you into a position where you're more worried about what everyone else is thinking. You're more worried about failing. You're not thinking from a place of confidence and optimism. So the ability to work with resilience presupposes that you are self-aware enough to be able to get in stride. And we're going to unpack that a little later today, and we'll get into it in more depth in our meeting in 2 weeks' time. But being able to bring your best game and knowing what that even looks like is a part of, you know, resilient leadership. And finally, just like all athletes will say, you know, no matter how much you train, no matter how many times you've won in the past, things can go wrong on the day and things can go right on the day. We all need a little pinch of luck. If you're cooking, they say just needs a pinch of salt. You know, when you're competing as an athlete, you need a little bit of luck. And when you're leading, I would say to you, you need a leap of faith. And I'm not talking about religious faith. I'm talking about a leap of being bold. There is no amount of knowledge, confidence that removes the sense of fear. But facing that fear, you know, courage isn't the removal of fear. It's seeing the fear and going forward anyway. And it's being willing to do that and trusting yourself that even in that quandary and the ambiguity, the uncertainty, you will figure it out. And that journey is going to be better than wallowing where you are today. So these are all the components to me that, you know, if we go back and look at those leaders that have really stood out, they're all doing these things. And if we want to have more resilience, to dig deeper through the challenging times that may lie ahead, I heard Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, say yesterday on the news, you know, Australia is becoming one of the toughest countries to live in. I'm like, wow, what a different perspective. We've been often told we're the lucky country. You know, people say it's like paradise here, how beautiful it is to live here. Yeah, but with the fires, you know, with the floods, with some of the challenges that those things bring, distance and disconnection, you know, there's some new challenges now. And if we're going to dig deeper and provide that leadership to our families, let alone in business and to other, you know, people in our lives, we do need to understand what does it take to be more resilient. Understanding your ID is really important. It's not the be all and end all. These other things about, you know, choosing and knowing how to have a really resilient perspective, being clear on your beliefs that hold you through, and knowing that no matter how well you do perspective, beliefs, and bringing your best game, it's still going to take a leap of faith, and being willing to do that. That's I think the formula that we all need to draw from to be more resilient. I'm going to stop there and just invite any questions or comments before we then move in to the ID piece of resilience. Anyone have anything they'd like to share about what I've said, whether you agree with it, disagree, have a different perspective? Yeah, I just read your comment, Greg, about grandparents being a lot more calm, you know, than they were as parents raising their kids. And a lot of that is exactly because of what we just said. So let's
Paul, sorry, Paul, I was just going to add, just reading back your list that you had for perspective, one thing that really stood out to me onto the next part of that list was, and it's maybe not all those leaders, or maybe it is, but certainly leaders that I reflect on, is they have a strong sense of commitment. So they don't get halfway through the game and pull out like some leaders that have done in the past. They're committed to the cause, they stay the course, and they're willing to make the big decisions, make the tough calls, and they're even willing to be unpopular because there's an end game that they can see, and they're committed to that end game.
Well said. Well said. It's funny you say that. I actually had conviction down as one of the things that I saw, and I thought about it, and I actually changed it to the conversations they have with themselves, because what I realized was conviction, even having been through this myself, and I've had a number of setbacks myself, the conviction wasn't a one-off. It wasn't, there was a decision that I made to stay with something, but I had to continuously have this conversation with myself to stay true to it, and when I explored over the years, studying leadership the way I do, I've talked to people about these conversations with themselves. And what I've found, and I find it quite staggering, and I'm sure there might be people on the call that relate to this. So I was in a conversation one time where someone said to me, "Do I ever have a negative thought?" Right. And I stopped and I thought, I said, actually, I don't. I just don't. And if I did, I said, it's like a little fire and it's like a match, I'm just like, blow it out and it's done. And that person said to me, for me, it's like a raging fire in my mind all the time. The conversations that were going on in their minds were ones that were the opposite to mine, and you would never know from the way that they were living. They looked happy. They looked, I won't say successful, but they looked like they were achieving and getting through life fine, but the amount of work they had to do internally, like upstairs, to keep counter balancing those internal voices, whether you call that from their upbringing or things that had happened to them or natural wiring, whatever it might have been, there was a lot of work they were doing to fight almost like the demons in their head. That sounds like too strong a word. But I realized then the power of internal conversations, and conviction is a continuous, what I learned is a continuous conversation. But you're absolutely right to call it out. I'm not saying it shouldn't be there as a separate thing, but I do think that there are so many people that have challenging conversations in their minds all the time. And before they can have a conviction, just even dealing with those voices that keep running through those conversations. One of the people on our team, Pam Jacoby, talks about be careful of the conversations you're having with yourself. And it's so true. I've gone into like meetings where I've already started having a conversation with myself about that person or how they're likely to react, and making the assumptions I make. And when I check myself and say, what is the conversation I'm having with myself? And is it a positive, love and courage conversation, or is it a negative fear and anxiety conversation? Just changing that conversation in my own head changes my resilience. Thanks for calling it out, Greg. Anybody else? All right, so now if we bring in the perspective of ID to this, so if, bringing your best game is a part of this. And the way I'd like to layer this up is we have some research going on at the moment in Ohio State University. And the lady leading that research, Professor Laurie Kendall, she is studying ID and leadership, and one of the physical elements of this, not just the psychological side of it. But she said, Paul, there is a physical shift that occurs in people when they're in stride versus out of stride. And it can be measured in terms of the way the cellular makeup occurs. What she was saying was, when we are stressed and we're out of stride and we're playing smaller, we come from a place of fight or flight. And that's a fearful place. That's where we're more worried about how things are going to play out. So we're not showing up at our best. But when we are free of that, we're in stride, we're in flow, you know, and we've got the confidence and the self-esteem that comes with that. We're not as worried about what might go wrong or what others might think. We're focusing more on what's going to go right and what we're going to achieve and how it's going to work and who we're bringing along that journey. So we are much more inclined to bring our best game when we're in stride. And that's not just about what you do. That's about just who you are and who you're being in that moment. And so I was looking at this through ID thinking, okay, so with the different instincts, what do we draw on to be more resilient? And I just thought we can have a discussion about this, but I'm just going to throw out one of our matrices on resilience, just as a draft. I actually want to refine this with your input this week, and in 2 weeks' time, we'll shake this up and it'll be a little tool then that we have on resilience. But let me show it to you now. So if you just think about this from the 8 different directions of the ID to use and avoid each of the 4 instincts, when you think about, let's just take verified drive, but you can think about this for all of your drives, and some of you might have some comments here about how you do this. But if you think about as a verifier, where do you go to be more resilient? Perspective is, I think, whilst it's true for everyone, perspective is an easier or a natural thing to do. Shouldn't say it's easy. It's a natural thing to do for the verifiers who naturally compare and look for perspective and then bring that perspective. If you are out to prove someone wrong or prove yourself right, whichever way you want to look at that, that's a very big motivator that helps a verifier be more resilient. And the same with track record. Given that we live off past, we've been verifiers, live off past experience, the more you've got a track record that has been consistent, the more you can dig deeper, you know, using that drive to be more resilient. And so it goes for each of the other, 7 directions. That if you're an avoid verifier, and Grant, you just talked about making that commitment, an avoid verifier is all or nothing. We often say, they're 100 miles an hour or they're 0. So if they're wavering, that's going to be really hard to be resilient. But if you are all or nothing, if you're like, I am in 100%, then you're much more likely to be able to dig deep and get resilient. So if you felt yourself as an avoid verifier, if you felt yourself being ambivalent about something, or, as we say, on the fence a little bit, that's going to be, you're not going to be able to be as resilient as if you actually get 100% in. So the way you would get there is say, what does it take for me to get 100% in? Do I just take that leap of faith and cut my options off and make that what I do? Is it around collaboration? Is that what you need to create more energy and involve other people? Is it about bringing that sense of equality? Like the fact that you get in there with the troops, you're no better or worse than anyone else. You're in there on the level with others, getting your hands dirty. Is that where you go to? So I just put up these as prompts for discussion. And I'd really invite you to think about, okay, where do you go to? If you think about your strongest drive, if your strongest drive is a completer, where do you, to be more resilient and dig deeper, where do you go that you can see is linked to your ID? And obviously your whole ID plays out. So it will be a combination of some of these. And again, those nuances we'll unpack in 2 weeks' time in the ID masterclass. But just to break it down and give you some simplicity, if we think of it in the 4 drives and the 8 directions, think about, are these true for you? Are some of these you don't relate to? Do you have something else that you might offer up? Let's open up the discussion just to hear from those of you who can relate to this, and sort of, you might want to endorse something here. You might want to change something. You might want to add to it. But I'd love to get some conversation from you around what do you do when you have to dig deeper and be more resilient, and where do you see that tied to your ID? Who would like to? I might just leave the slide up so that you can see it.
So this is Patricia. I'll just jump in. For the one that really jumped out to me is, I'm even in all my drives 3737. but the one that jumped out to me the most is the authenticate. And when I need to get resilient, I need to dig deep. I have to get out and move. I have to go walk, take the dog, do something. Are you frozen, Paul?
You knocked him out, Pat.
I was going to say, did he not like what I said? So now he's not speaking to me?
He was stunned by it. He was stunned by it. All of us authenticates are nodding.
Oh,
Look, if I could build on you, Patricia,
yeah.
that for me, I realize in this talk, I'm realizing I'm a situational leadership. I lead when there's no leadership happening. I don't need to be a leader per se, you know, and in fact, sometimes I don't want to be because it's a pain in the butt, right? So, but when something needs to be done, it seems like we authenticates, we can't help but step in. And the question becomes, are we stepping in and helping? Or are we stepping in because we're just frustrated because nothing's getting done, you know? So my leadership is knowing when to shut me up and when to encourage others. But I've got to do something, and that it may look like hero later. I'm thinking of some things where I've done some stuff, and some people go, "Wow, that was." I went, "Yeah, someone had to do something." It wasn't anything like I will be a leader, right? It was like, "Oh no, we got to act on this," you know. And I'm just wondering if that's true for any of the others. I'm just working with Authenticate, obviously, and where we become leaders, we don't seek leader, if that makes any sense. Anyone else?
And go ahead, Jose.
Back, Mark and Greg, I think that's exactly what I was thinking through the whole thing, is that when we're talking about elected leaders, obviously they've got the trouble of getting elected and becoming the leader. But generally speaking, across from the person who sweeps the floor right through to the chairman of the board, chairwoman.
Yeah, okay, we lost you.
Sorry, yeah, the phone hijacks.
Good, you're back.
Headphones. Yeah, right through. It's about where everyone is showing leadership in that they're doing their bit. The same thing for from the guy that's digging the trenches right through to the field marshal. They're all involved in the leadership. The leadership is shown through example by rising, by showing resilience, rather than necessarily in an individual, I think. And that's where a group of us will get together and we're going to be resolving a problem. We're going to fix a thing. Every one of us is showing leadership. Every one of us is involved in that, and we're all contributors to it. So for me, it's, let's not get too hung up on, and I totally backmark you, Greg. It's take action for us green ups. Let's just do something. Let's get it going.
Maybe we should let someone else talk then.
Yes, on my side, Greg, I think, you know, I take as a 7 verify for granted. You know, I've checked it out. If I can't check it out, I'll find expert opinion or whatever. But the green part really comes with commitment. Once you are visibly and actually committed, then you have to do what it takes. And it's that committing to lead that makes it work. Once you're committed, then nothing's going to stop you. And I'm not saying you're being dogmatic, but your focus is there. All the extraneous nonsense on either side doesn't matter. And then you go for it.
Yeah.
That commitment, I find, is critical. And then the rest is easy.
I think particularly with your ID too, Doug, you've got the avoid improvise, and commitment for avoid improvise is huge. Once it's committed, you just keep, you know, and I think, you know, almost double with your authenticate as well. You've said you're going to do it, you're going to do it, come hell or high water, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And just keep plowing through.
Ian, you said a great thing. He says, once you've committed, what's the step before that? What has to happen? Because once you get the gears running, but what's before that?
I think going to play out differently for different IDs. But for the avoid
you.
improvise, the commitment, once you've thought it through, and whether you've gone through the risk assessment, it's better to do it than not do it. The risk is going to be greater, but you've made an assessment. But once you're in it, and you've said, okay, I've thought it through, I've assessed what's going to happen, and so this coming from an 8363, I'm in, and I'm going to do it. And the other thing that I think is also an expression resonated for me was just keep showing up, like just keep turning up. Like, even though it's not working the way, just keep turning up, whether it's your fitness, whether it's your diet, whatever it is, just keep turning up and it will happen. So there's that. And I think that does play a big part in resilience, I know with my ID. And I think, probably the use, complete, avoid, improvise, definitely, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. The green part I find is you actually need authority as well. You've got to be given the authority and then commit to do it. A bit like Zelensky, ex-comedian, etc., gets voted in. He's given the authority to lead, and he gets up and does it.
Absolutely.
Someone else, where is everyone?
I was going to say, I think that's kind of ID dependent too, because some people don't need the permission or the authority to go ahead and just
Beat me to it.
Yeah. Kermit.
Well, I was
Go,
thinking,
Kermit.
back in the days of reading John Maxwell, follow me, I'm right behind you. And the idea that you can lead up and down leadership, because leadership in a word is influence. So if you're able to influence someone, it doesn't matter. And I deal with this a lot in the military. People think that because they have rank that they're leaders, and that is not the case.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you look around the boardroom at the table, who's sitting there, the person sitting at the end of the table isn't always the person that's actually making the decisions. And you have to recognize that nuance. But I mean, although to your point, yes, if someone's voted in and they're elected as the leader, then obviously that, I think, makes it easier for certain IDs, but I don't know that it's necessarily a requirement.
Right. And Kermit, the way you're wired, you would know who the leader was in the room. You'd have that spidey sense.
You can't fool the nine, huh? Judy, where are you with all this?
I'm really thinking about all of this.
Well, that ain't gonna.
So much of what was said about other IDs is true for me, being a completer and so once I am committed and have the ability for whatever reason to complete something, there's nothing that can stop me. And when I say have the ability, it would be something to do with my health that would stop me. Nothing else will stop me.
Right.
Whatever kind of research or answers or whatever I need to be able to move ahead, it's always my health that would put a roadblock in there. And so much of what everybody has said about their IDs, I relate with that.
Just so everybody knows, that 9's not right in Judy's score there.
Very, very serious verifier there.
That 9?
You've got a 9.
9574.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that
Yeah, that's okay. I'm just in case we're doing, some new kids are going, what the hell? Who's speaking now?
I've really made a serious, yeah, I'm not.
I'm curious to see with some of the other folks on here that haven't chipped in, because this is a real personal thing of what resilience is and when you're leading. And I don't want to call anyone out, but I want to invite someone who hasn't said anything yet. And you're smiling when I say that, person with blonde hair.
There's Julianne.
I wonder if you
She's
want
volunteering.
Julianne,
Julianne, you're up.
Yeah. What?
Go.
It's interesting in Paul's slide, he had hope under use improvise, but for me, and I'm a 7354, and I'd be interested to know how people are with the different drives. Having hope is huge. And I don't see that that's just the use improvise. Like, it's big for me, you know, and it might be you haven't got it, but you've got to find it to have that resilience. I'd be interested to hear others' perspectives around hope.
Go, Shannon.
I guess I can kind of speak to hope. So I'm a 7663. And for me, it's funny because I know that my strongest drives are the use, verify, and avoid improvise, but I always find myself relating to the use complete drive, and creating harmony with everything that I do and finding the things. Well, I mean, I guess it all kind of goes together, right? Because the avoid improvise is sitting there trying to find all the disharmony and everything and trying to like fix it all to create this big picture. And if I can't see the big picture and I'm not driving towards something real, right? Because I'm also use authenticate, then I do lose hope. Like I'm with you, Juliet, on that, where it's like I need to understand that I'm driving towards something that's really going to make impact, or else there is no hope. And it really does take a lot out of me to stay resilient, especially when everybody's looking at me to create the harmony and to create the plan and to drive the train, you know. And I'm like, you know, and I mean, so my organization is a bunch of verifiers, like primarily everybody's a verifier, a use, verify, and an avoid improvise. And so we're constantly picking each other's ideas apart, and our poor improvisers are sitting there trying to rally the troops. And I kind of try to come in and create the bridge the gap there and be like, we have a plan. Like, they're not just rallying you for no reason. Like, trust them. They're real. It's real. And so yeah, like I think you need the energy though. You need the hope, you need the energy, so that, or at least I do, not you. I do like need the hope and the energy to continue to like try to piece together everything and do what I can to bridge the gap between some of those battling drives.
Yeah, good. Thanks. I knew you had something bubbling there.
I'm usually the last to speak, but I've got a lot going on up here.
An entire organization of use, verify, and avoid improvise. My heart just is like sinking as you. But I appreciate that you recognize the rally cry of the use improvise. So
they're great. When they're on, they are on. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. I'm on it.
Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for holding fort, Greg, while I was gone. You guys are on a roll. Don't let me stop. I just put the slide up in case it would be helpful to you.
Richard, did you have something sitting there under that chin?
So this is Patricia again, if nobody else is going to jump in. Under the complete drive, when and avoid complete, I should say, the quick wins. If I'm feeling like I don't have can't bounce back as well as I want to, if I get started on something quickly and can get like a quick win under my belt, then it makes me like be able to move faster and feel more resilient and, you know, rally everybody together about what I'm trying to accomplish.
yeah, and I saw the word pioneer, and that resonates, like blazing the new trail kind of thing. But the ability to pivot is an avoid complete. That there may be other options that have already been decided, so you're not pioneering something new, but the ability to see what like try something different until you start to get traction, and that sometimes can just keep things going until you can then go in the direction you need.
Now's the time, folks.
I was just going to say, because a lot of the area I work in has a lot of ambiguity, and I find that like that in that space, like it creates a lot of discomfort when people don't know what to do. And it's like, okay, well, let's try this. And, you know, I think that sometimes people think that you've got the answer. And in actual fact, all you've got is an idea. So the idea mightn't work. But because you've got the confidence that, okay, you've learned something, now let's try this. Like, so you just keep like moving on with another idea, and eventually you find one that works. But it's like at the beginning, people just expect that the first one you come up with is the one that's going to be the one to work. So
Yeah.
I think in a leadership role, like if you've got that sort of thing happening in the background, you have to be careful that you're not like losing people in the changes that you're making, because you're moving quickly to another point. And I think sometimes people can get dizzy if it's very ambiguous and there's no real solution, and all you're doing is just, okay, let's try that, let's try that, let's try that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes that has to be like, I find I have to not park it, but it still has to happen, but you have to do it in a way that it's not like interrupting the big picture, because you're still trying to get to that big picture, but you have to get that part of it solved first, so to be able to get there. So yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. I see that play out all the time, Richard, with leaders that are, okay, this, you know, and then the other one, the Ians of the world are going, excuse me, we just poured the foundation. Why are we building over there now? You know, so that's a great point.
But I think it's a good point too, Greg, because I think, you know, with sort of my style, with my use, complete, avoid, improvise, then we can also do the opposite. We can just plow ahead, like our resilience. It's like, this is the plan. We're just going to keep executing on this plan until it actually works, which, you know, can have the opposite impact, obviously, when we need to pivot. So I think it's just, again, you've got to sort of almost sometimes find the middle ground. But I do think, you know, the up, down type of ID, that's where the resilience comes from. It's like, we're now committed, we're doing the plan, we're just going to keep moving forward, and this is what's happening.
You know, that's a good thing. You make, when does resilience become cement? And you know,
I was just thinking the same thing. I remember someone, I can't remember the exact phrase, but someone said, what's the difference between bashing your head against a brick wall and resilience? You know?
Yeah, depends on the
And
wall.
it's knowing when to call it. And I'd be interested if people have got, but you know, some of you where you felt you've had to be really resilient and how you've gone about doing that. Maybe you called on something altogether different, but I'm especially interested if you've done it and you can see where it ties to your ID and you can tell that story for the benefit of everyone on the call. And then the next part would be if you have an example of resilience gets to a point where you know, you have to stop. I mean, it goes too far. What's the point of being resilient down a dead end, you know? And how do you call that? Anyone have a story about their resilience?
Maybe we should store them up for next week, Paul, since we're at the top of the hour now.
Yeah. Are we there? We're almost there, yeah. Well, maybe it is something to think about. You know, I mean, I do have those examples. I've shared, you know, some of them, but whether they're to do with my kids' health, which were part of it. You know, I've had a child get diagnosed with leukemia. I've had another one with emergency brain surgery. I have the business, even as late as COVID. I remember when COVID first hit, and I'm like, oh my God, I could lose everything, you know? And straight away, I guess it was perspective. And I'm like, okay, so if I lost everything, what else do I still have? I've still got me. I've still got my children. I've still got my personality. I can still wake up every morning and go to the beach and look at the sunrise and just sort of go, you know what, how fortunate am I to live where I live? Even if I start all over again, there are other people who are worse than me. And I, in that moment, thought, you know what, there's nothing really to worry about. If I lost it all, maybe that will be a gift. And I just remember thinking that way. Then my next step was, so what could I do? What would be the most insane thing to do if we're in that situation? And it was like, you know, and this was the leap of faith thing and doing the opposite to what I felt comfortable. I'm like, well, you give it all away. You just go and start contributing and giving back. And that's where these webinars came from, you know. Again, I guess you'd say that's all part of perspective. But there was definitely a leap of faith element there for me. I had no idea where it would go to, but I did trust that if I did things from a good place, it would all work out. And, you know, I think you people on these calls are just living proof of the value that it all worked out, you know. So that's just a simple example for myself where I can see it tied to my verify and avoid improvise and avoid authenticate and improvise drives. But I really encourage you to think about those for yourself, because stories are one thing that give you resilience, like their track record. But when you can actually ground it in a framework like your ID, and you can see it wasn't just coincidence or luck, but it actually had reason for working. You know, there was a basis to it that gives substance, and substance gives you the strength to be able to rely on it into the future. And that's powerful. And you will show up differently with those around you who get totally consumed by the turmoil, and you're able to rise above it with more resilience. Because I do think we're in a very interesting world right now, and we need to be able to, you know, be more resilient. So thank you for being on the call. I apologize for the mishaps on my end. I have no explanation for why those things were occurring, other than my internet is down here, and I have a backup internet supply, which I've now got working, but I don't know what's happened. So I apologize for that looking messy for you guys. My internet has not been as resilient as I needed it to be today. But anyway, thank you, Greg, for carrying over on the gaps. I really not only appreciate it, I sensed you would do that, and I really value that your heart and your ability to make that happen. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week, and hopefully we'll see the bulk of you in a couple of weeks' time. Take care.